Welcome to Soltron. This is the video review for Mini Force Bigkong. Here's how he scales with Transformers and the other Mini Force figures. So you can see he's a lot bulkier than Voyager, Optimus Primal here. He's actually, in terms of bulk, he might be closer to a leader class figure. And let me just talk about prices real fast. So with like a best offer, this guy's probably around $70 with shipping. This guy was like $50, which is too much for this size figure. So on eBay, you find these for like $50 pretty commonly. And then these guys with like a best offer is probably like $90, which is pretty expensive. So Mini Force in general is a really expensive line. And here's the box. It's a pretty attractive box. It's got a clamshell inside, and then really attractive CGI artwork on all the sides. And then this is also CGI. This is not actually what the figure looks like. So all of these are just CGI. He does not have like this kind of articulation. He's not going to be able to pull off any of these poses, especially not this. That's just crazy. And then the instructions are very cost-cutting. They're just pretty bland, cheap looking, not glossy at all. So as far as the mini figures go, this one was from the older line. So this guy's about 3 inches. This guy's about 4 inches, so G.I. Joe sized. They're pretty similar. The big size is nice. They get a little bit more on the paint apps. So he's looking pretty sharp. And then he's looking more like a unique Power Ranger. This one looks like a pretty big Jungle Fury knockoff, especially with those three. So yeah, this is pretty generic looking. And then for articulation, he does have a swivel on the neck. It only goes that far before it gets in the way in the collar. And then there's no outward shoulder, but you can raise the shoulder. It's on a ball joint, but no outward motion really. There's no bicep swivel, of course. You do have 90-degree elbow, which can also bend the other direction. It's probably cost-cutting, so they can use the same forearms for both. And then you do have a wrist swivel, which is pretty nice. No waist articulation. You do have ball joint on the hips, which gives you this much outward kick. And then you get a full forward kick, full backward kick. And then you get 90 degrees on the knee. And that's it for articulation. So not great. Definitely not G.I. Joe level, but it'll do what you need him to do, basically. So, not too bad on the posability, but definitely missing some obvious joints. And the minifigure's looking pretty cool next to the armor that he gets to ride in. So, I really do like this gimmick. So, to activate it, you basically just open up the back panel here. And then your figure is just going to drop inside. I think you have to fold the elbows to get the arms out of the way. But this figure is just going to drop inside. And actually the shark one, the Megalodon, does it better. But because it holds the figure better, he just like flops around in here. And then he might fall down and the feet might end up in the wrong place. They're supposed to end up on these platforms here, like on the hips. So that's where you want the feet to be, for the figure to be in the right position. And then you're supposed to open up the visor. And that's as far up as it goes. So you have a couple issues here. Is when you're getting in the position to close up the back panel, the helmet of the minifigure is actually too big for this space. It doesn't fit in. So this won't close past the helmet. So you actually have to lean the figure backwards and then insert the head under the helmet, which totally defeats the purpose of this. So this is now worthless. That doesn't do anything useful. And then you just have to swivel the whole figure forward. So basically he's just going to lay down in the back section of this. And then you try to get him as into the helmet as possible. So this is not a very nice process of getting the figure into place. And then you peg this into place, and then probably your figure is going to fall down and not put his feet where they need to be. So you're going to have to straighten that all out. And then while you're fiddling with all that, his head is not in the helmet. So this is pretty poorly designed. Like, it's just It's just hard to get the head like that. That's what you want. That's pretty good looking. The visor is like where the eyes of the helmet are, so it's kind of in the wrong place, but whatever, that's better than what's currently going on. So I'm going to have to probably fiddle with this guy off camera to get this all closed up and get the head inside the head helmet. Okay, so his head is in there. It's hard to see. The visor's like, his head is actually looking this way, so it's looking crooked. But I challenge you to do better, because getting everything in place and then having his feet in the correct place, it's all just a big hassle, because this chest is just so huge, the figure just flops around really annoyingly, so it's really difficult to get everything lined up. They could have easily fixed that by putting a peg in their back or something, so that, or just molding the inside of this to the figure's body so he just clips in place would be nice. But they did some cost cutting, and unfortunately the inside of this chest is too hollow and the figure can just move around and flop around in here just too easily. So he doesn't fit snugly, which means you're not going to get the eyes looking out of the head of this robot. And let's go back in time a little bit and contrast with that, with the Megalodon. So you do the same thing. You fold up the elbows. The head's going to peek out the top here. And then there's barely any space. Once you have the elbows folded in, like look at this torso. Like he's not moving anywhere. There's so little clearance that everything's held snugly into place. You move this down, and since you don't have to mess with the helmet going over the head, everything just fits. And this figure, like, there's just no play. It's not going anywhere. Everything fits perfectly. The head is perfectly centered. Everything is really nicely done. So they definitely took a step back there when they were designing this guy. He's a little bit worse, unfortunately. But let's go ahead and zoom in on this head sculpt. So the head is a really cool design. That's why I wanted this one over the other ones. Like, the helmet's pretty cool. Really reminds me of Biclons or Metallians. And then overall, the colors on this guy are really gorgeous. It's just nice to see this figure, and he looks kind of sinister. Even though the colors are nice and bright, he does look very imposing still. So I just really like this color palette. It's a nice change from the blue and red that you always see on heroic robots. So all around, this figure's looking really good, but you can see the transformation is going to be really simple. These already look like the gorilla arms, and then you can see the legs are not going to really do anything. Those are the gorilla legs right there. And then as for articulation, you can fold these fists. The arms do rotate all the way around on ratchets. They don't have any real outward motion. You can't swivel it because these shoulder pads have to peg in place, but if you unpeg them, you can get a bicep swivel, which is nice. And then when these are pegged in place, that disables that. And then you do have an elbow joint, but unfortunately it goes like this. So I guess if you want him punching his own chest, he can do that, but why would you ever want that? So if you unpeg the shoulder, then he can do an uppercut at least. So it's kind of an action pose, so you can kind of do that, but you totally destroy the shoulder sculpt. Like, look at that compared to this shoulder. It just doesn't work. So this is pretty poor engineering, actually. They could have put this on a separate ring, and you could have still had that bicep swivel, so they could have engineered that better. So bad choice on their part, on the design part. And then, of course, no head articulation. You saw the whole helmet assembly. None of that's going to work. But that doesn't surprise me at all. And then you do get a ball joint hip, so you can get a little bit of outward motion. So maybe about 45 degrees. And then you do get a ratcheted forward kick, about that far. And then the foot is going to get in the way of your backward kick. And then you do get a knee, which is almost nothing. And then a pivot here. And you would think that this would become the robot feet, but this doesn't rotate around at all. And there's no waist joint. For obvious reasons, you can't get a waist joint with a little figure in there. So very, very limited articulation. And then the transformation is really simple. You're just going to take the shoulder pads, you're going to rotate them around to the fists, and those are going to clip onto the back of the fists. And one thing that, well, I'll get to that when I get to articulation, but you do the same thing on this side, and this huge boxing glove kind of thing, or shield, I don't know what you call this, but this is going to come off. So he does have parts forming, unfortunately. When you have a really simple figure like this, you'd expect there to not be parts forming. But it is for the weapon, so I guess that's okay. And then you're going to open these chest panels, and then the head, you're going to now remove the inner rope, the inner figure, and then fold down this helmet to go inside the chest. And then the head is going to go up on this armature piece, this double hinge, and that's going to clip into place here, and then you raise up the visor, and then you close up the chest sections, and then now you can rotate these bicep swivels, and then you can use all the leg articulation to get a more natural looking pose. And there's basically your ape mode. And then this guy's just going to hop on the back and hold on to these handlebars on the back right here. So pretty decent ape mode. Oh, and then of course you need his butt plate is going to just clip on back here just to round him out, make it look a little nicer in the back. And then you have no head articulation. You do have these bicep swivels, but now you lose the elbow joints because now these are clipped into this. So now he can't do this anymore unless you unclip, and then that again destroys the whole sculpt because this is all supposed to be a solid punching piece. So you're going to lose arm articulation in both modes, which is not great engineering. And then you should probably swivel this forward like this. And then you do have the same leg articulation, so you can also get him, maybe you can get him standing up. Not really, because the head is always going to be staring up. So he does have to be laying down in your typical gorilla pose. Here's how these three robots look together. So much bigger than Optimus Primal and significantly bulkier than the Megalodon. Even when Optimus Primal's standing up, they're now head to head. So if this guy could actually stand up, he would still be really dwarfing Optimus Primal, but unfortunately then the head can't look down. Well, I guess you can pretend by unclipping the head, but then the butt plate gets in the way, so you can't even really straighten out the legs. He's definitely not intended to stand up like this, but there's your comparison if you were looking for that. So I think the gorilla mode is pretty good. I would rate it definitely an 8. It's a pretty good looking gorilla. It's pretty obvious what it is. The fun factor is pretty low for me because transforming them from mode to mode isn't very interesting. You just sit this up and then move the shoulder pad up, so it's not even much of a transformation. So the fun factor is probably like a 6, 7. It's fun to have the rope, the Sentai figure, the Power Ranger basically riding the robot, and then you can fit inside, so that's actually pretty good for the playability. And then the robot mode I think is different enough for the ape that I could probably rate the robot as an 8 because it looks different enough, but they're a little bit too similar to get a higher score. So you can buy from my Korean seller, which is at the It's Toy Shop on eBay. I'll leave a link in the description. And make sure that you're buying some of my used robots, because otherwise these things are just going to waste and just staying in storage. Alright, I'll see you next time.